has hit record. Just as I was about to say that. Fantastic. Great minds like I think. Cool. Folks, thank you so much for joining 6 p.m. Monday, 14th of November for the Earlywork Ex-Atlassian Break into Product Management event. This is a topic that hits pretty close to home. So for those who don't know, prior to starting Earlywork, I was an APM at Atlassian, and that was my first full-time job coming out of university. So to be honest, the event we're hosting today is the event that I wish I had much, much earlier when I was still at uni, wondering about, can I do something that's kind of techie, kind of businessy? And fortunately, we've got an awesome group of people we're doing it with. Before I go off and give them intros, I'd just love to get a sense of who the hell is in this virtual metaverse room with us right now. If you are currently a university student, can you give me just a thumb reaction with the Zoom reactions? One of these ones. I see. Yeah. Okay. Some uni. Oh, okay. Yeah. Fair few. All right. A good split. So the rest of you, how many folks are working full-time right now and in the tech industry, but perhaps not in a product role? A couple. Okay. So looking to make the switch over internally. We can help with that. We can help with that. And then curious, are there any folks here working full-time, but not working in the tech industry? So perhaps working in consulting or finance or a different industry? Chuck up a thumb react if so. A couple, a smattering. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I think the beautiful thing about today's panel, why I'm really excited to have them on board, is we have 3 awesome young product managers from 3 pretty different backgrounds in terms of education and work experience. And I think the really powerful thing about product is there's not just one way to break in. You could go through an APM internship or grad program. You could, transfer internally at your company, or you can, hustle your way in to a new role at an early stage startup. In order to learn more about those different paths and dive in and help you folks understand the secrets to landing your first PM role, we're going to kick it off with our 3 beautiful guests, Joe, Izzy, and Sarah. Maybe kicking off with Joe, I'd love to understand 3 key things. Number 1, what does your company do? Number 2, what is your role involved day to day? And number 3, what's your favorite product and why?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dan. So hi, everyone. I'm Joe. I currently work at Cecil. I'm not going to bother asking how many of you know Cecil. So I'll just explain. It's a pretty early stage startup. We're climate tech. And I might just give a quick run through of our vision. So starting broad, we really see a future world where nature is valued as an asset class and trillions of dollars of investment actually go towards restoring it each year. We're a little bit far away from that at the moment. So to achieve it, at Cecil, we create software for teams that manage and run carbon projects. So think soil carbon, mangrove restoration, rainforest protection projects. We're not out there necessarily doing it ourselves, but we're creating software to help teams do that. And just quickly as well to clarify, a lot of people get us confused with carbon accounting or emissions calculators. And that really, I like to describe it, sits on the demand side for corporates who maybe need to offset their emissions. Cecil operates more on the supply side, enabling people to generate those carbon credits. So in a nutshell, our solution is to help project developers working on carbon projects. But right now their tools are email and spreadsheets and Word documents, making it really time consuming and difficult to manage projects. So we're creating vertical specific project management and supporting teams in collecting and storing these nature specific fields like methodologies and geospatial data. And then once we have all of that, enabling them to share it with other players in the ecosystem like investors and auditors and service providers. So in a nutshell, the operating system for natural capital. The second question, kind of what the day-to-day looks like, really see myself as a bit of an intermediary between the customer and the engineer. So generally that looks like collecting feedback from customers, collating all of it to give a sense of where the demand is for a particular feature, from there kind of prioritizing what needs to get built, and then working with our design to properly validate the problem, make sure it fits, and then working with our engineers to build it and release it. So that's kind of day to day. And what was the last question, Dan?
What's your favorite product and why? Classic PM question.
Classic PM question. I do really love my Nespresso machine purely for convenience. It is like one button. I hardly clean the thing. And it's just so convenient, like one button for coffee. And it's like reasonably cheap and I can access it from my house. So that's it.
Nice. Very cool. Over to Izzy.
Cool. Hey, everyone. My name's Izzy. I work at Atlassian. If you haven't heard of us, we are a big tech company. We make software that helps teams collaborate better together. So you might have heard of Jira, Confluence, Trello. Those are all some of the products that we make. And our mission is to unleash the potential of every team. It's a very like catchphrasey answer, but that's kind of like the North Star. All the products that we build, the intention is to help teams work better together in order to unleash their potential and basically allow them to not focus on like the administrative tasks and just kind of let them focus on doing their best work by building great collaboration software. And in terms of what I do, so I'm working on an area of our Agile and DevOps offering. So basically products like Jira Software, Bitbucket, and Compass. And what my team does is we use teams' historical data to basically suggest actions and recommendations and process improvements based on their previous performance. So it's a really interesting intersection of data, AI/ML, and using that data to create really positive habits in our users. It's very, very nascent, very, very emerging. The team's only been around for like 6 months. So yeah, it's a very interesting space that I get to work in. And then what my favorite product is and why would definitely be the Aura Ring, which I'm wearing right now. The Aura Ring is, oh my gosh, Bryce, yes. I see Bryce has got one too. Oh, yours is black, that's nice. The Aura Ring is basically like a little wearable health device. It's kind of like the Apple Watch, but in a ring. It has a bunch of sensors and it gives you a bunch of information about your biometrics so that you know like what your sleep quality is, does activity tracking, kind of like measures your vitals. And I kind of bought it because I was interested in, oh, this is a habit forming data product. What an interesting case study for the work that I do. And then I got really addicted to it and I started checking it every day. And then my step count increased and now I love it and it has succeeded in changing my behavior. So that's definitely my favorite product. Oh, Dan, your Aura Ring, bro. That's nice.
No, yeah, my Aura Ring, it's still under warranty. So they're giving me an Aura Ring for free with lifetime subscription. So very happy chappy. And yes, also very bullish on the Aura Ring. Cool. Over to Sarah from Val.
Sweet. Hey guys, Sarah here. I make meat for a living. As a vegetarian of 14 years, I make meat. But in all seriousness, I work at Val, where we're on a mission to feed billions of people sustainably, using real meat from animal cells without having to kill the animals themselves. And we're approaching culture meat from a different angle at Val, where essentially we're not pursuing this narrative of replication, trying to recreate the pre-existing, but we're asking ourselves, you know, now that we don't have to domesticate animals for meat, what else can we create? And so we're trying to unlock the Earth's biodiversity to see what new flavors, sensory experiences, and nutrition we can bring to the world through meat. So yeah, it's a different style of product to SaaS. And with that said, working in product management for an alternative proteins company looks a little bit different to your traditional kind of PM playbook. I was actually the first product hire at Val. So my role has been super diverse. For the most part, I've been leading our voice of the customer practice. So bridging those kind of customer insights into product actions and roadmaps and strategy, working closely with our technical team, which for me, that is our food inventors, as well as our scientists, R&D engineers, and then trying to kind of bring our first product to market. So we're launching it later this year, maybe spilling into next year. And essentially we are going to be launching in Singapore a Japanese umai quail product, which is really, really exciting, the world's first cultured meat product from an exotic animal. But to be honest, being a product manager in an early stage company like Val, I do a lot of different things. Sometimes I do a lot of marketing, brand work. sometimes lean into sales. Sometimes I'm doing ethnography on the ground in Singapore. It really varies. My favorite product and why? I would probably say Liquid Death. I don't know if anyone's heard of Liquid Death. Essentially, it's this water company based in the US that is a really, really interesting example of a way that people are solving problems for customers in unique ways. Essentially, it's canned water that's marketed towards heavy metal lovers, your kind of beer drinking people who might live in the Midwest in the States. And essentially, it's trying to shift the narrative of more sustainable bottled or canned water options away from plastic into metal in a way that really appeals to a deep kind of problem and makes being sustainable cool, a thing that people choose selfishly because of the way it appeals to that narrative. So yeah, cool.
Super, super cool. So all the way from climate to enterprise collaboration to meat really goes to show, product management isn't just one sort of product type. There's a diversity of flavors out there. So depending upon whatever you fancy, there are options out there for you. I'd love to now kind of maybe dive a little bit more, into each of your stories and really understand kind of that transition going from non-product land to product land and kind of how you navigated that and really what inspired you. So maybe we'll kind of go in reverse order. So starting with Sarah, super, super interesting. So you, before starting the product role at Val, originally you're in a strategic design role and you had studied design and philosophy, which I think most folks here may not think of when it comes to kind of like product management as the kind of the traditional background. So I'd love to understand, like, how did you kind of like, why did you make that leap to product, and how did you talk through that with your manager to go, okay, I'm at a company in one role, but I want to shift into product? That's a really, really interesting journey.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess, to be honest, like I mentioned just before, I was actually Val's first product hire. So right from the get-go, I was doing super kind of generalized product work. And as a strategic designer, your kind of number one focus is customers, understanding them deeply to then ideate solutions and then kind of figure out ways to bridge that into product strategy. I saw product management as a natural evolution of that, the next step where you kind of take that deep understanding of the customer, then bridge that into the roadmap, and then work to gain buy-in with other teams, engineers, scientists, etc. And so I guess for me, it was a bit of a natural transition in the sense that working as a kind of solo product person initially at Val, I started leaning into having kind of my more designer and kind of human-centered design ideas naturally shifted to influencing that product roadmap. And then I guess it was just it was an easy conversation with our CEO, George, where I started to lean more into that work, was loving it. I was loving kind of extending my human-centered design skills into ways that I could think about that strategy and ways that I could kind of empower the technical team to make customer-centered decisions. And so, yeah, just raised that conversation, and it was a really natural transition. Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. Over to Izzy. So Izzy, I think probably compared to the other two panels here, you came from quite a technical background. So both computer science and mechatronic engineering. So I'd love to kind of dive in a little bit more into kind of what made you pursue the product management path over, say, an engineering career or a software engineering career. And in particular, when you thought about kind of, say, getting that first APM internship at Atlassian, what were the kind of non-technical experiences outside just that kind of technical skill set that helped you break in?
Yeah, good question. So the first part of your question was what motivated me to pursue product over engineering, which is a good question. I liked engineering, and I really liked computer science in particular. I really liked the coding and being able to tangibly build something that you came up with in your head. Like, that's really cool. But I think for me, I was doing some sort of deep self-reflection, and I was really trying to think about like the types of problems or challenges that didn't feel like work, but felt like play. Like, when was I at my best? When was I enjoying myself the most? And what did my skill set naturally kind of swing towards? And I was good at my technical courses, but I think when I really thought about the kind of problems that I really like to solve, it was always those very like human-centered kind of like impact type problems rather than the technical challenge itself. So like now that I get to work with a lot of really great engineers at Atlassian, and you know, I obviously did an engineering degree, so I know lots of engineers from that as well. I think like really great engineers have this quality where they can really appreciate and like froth a really sexy, elegant technical solution, like a sexy code base, or like a well-designed machine, or a well-designed, you know, technical solution of some sort. And I do not have that at all. Like for me, I was always like, I don't care if it's the scrappiest solution ever. I don't care if we have to hack it together. I don't care if it's a completely non-technical solution. Like what I really cared about was that impact for the customer and the commercialization aspect as well. So did some soul searching, and then I Googled a lot. I was like, tech jobs for people that like people, tech jobs for people that are strategically minded. And then you know, kind of dived into the world of PM, and I kind of looked at the limited resources that were available, and I was like, yeah, this definitely sounds like it could be for me. So that's kind of what motivated me to try PM instead of go straight into like an engineering grad role. And then in terms of the second part of your question, what sort of non-technical skills and experiences helped you break into a product internship? I think a lot of it I was doing already, but I didn't realize. So like when I was at uni, I did a lot of hackathons, but I always operated, I mean, I did like code up the prototypes and stuff, but I was always operating more in like a PM role with it, like unintentionally. So like doing the pitching and like the strategic and like the GDM, all of that, those sorts of activities. I dabbled with like, you know, my own personal projects here and there. And I think, yeah, in all of those, I was sort of operating more in the like voice of the customer, business centric kind of role. And so when I applied for a PM internship, I kind of had that under my belt as well. And to be specific, the non-technical skills that I think like really helped me were like, I had experience leading and managing teams of students in like product roadmap work. I had worked in these hackathons on like prototypes that I could show in interviews and talk about the way that I operated in a PM role, and like did market research and talk to customers and that kind of thing. And then the last thing was that my technical skills did help as well. Like technical PMs make great PMs, and non-technical PMs make great PMs too, but they're just like different flavors.
Super. Yeah, it's an awesome journey. And like, I think definitely resonate with the points around like, you know, even if it is more technical experiences, I think getting that leadership experience is just invaluable for product roles. I think like relative to other junior roles, it's the sort of role where you might be stepping up and having to, you know, influence or persuade people who are a lot more senior than you. And so thinking about how you can get those leadership reps and experiences in while at university is really, really key to building a lot of those foundations for a product role. So maybe then over to Joe, again, a different story. So Joe, you studied economics and biomedical science, again, a different background, and started out, funnily enough, in kind of Westpac, worked as a grad there, worked in kind of the, I believe it was treasury team. And then you joined Cecil, an early stage startup in the climate space as a PM. So it's like a very, very radical change. I'd love to understand, like, how did you decide product would be a path you'd enjoy, having come from, say, like a very big corporate background? And then how did you think about like conveying and telling the story around the relevance of those skills you had built to a product role? On mute.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Didn't come from a particularly technical background. And actually, I really wanted to experience like the startup environment, the startup culture. And so was led to join Earlywork. So unsponsored plug, but it was honestly like a gateway for me to come across all of these different gigs, all of these different people who were operating in the space. And at the time, it was kind of at the end of the COVID pandemic. And I was kind of keen for a change of lifestyle and like work structure and things like that. So ended up sending my founder a message, just a DM, and saying, hey, I really love what you're doing, read the intro, would love to have a chat. And I think that's definitely the benefit of Slack communities like Earlywork, is that you can kind of move away from that very traditional structured application process and get to know people on like that fundamental level. And see if you vibe, honestly. And I think that's really what it was. 3 kind of short, like 30-minute calls later, and I think we were kind of discussing what next steps would look like as a product manager. I didn't know whether it was something I would enjoy. I knew it was a generalist role, and I knew that this was an industry that I wanted to learn more about. So I think like definitely one of the best ways to understand an industry is to go and work in it. There's only so much that you can Google and research, but kind of living it day to day is one of the best things you can do. I really thought that climate would be one of those like generational topics. Like we're going to be talking about this for the next 100 years. And I wanted to get in right at the beginning, or as early as I could get. So that was kind of what led me to Cecil. And like, I think because I didn't have things like Izzy did, like a prototype or things like that, I really had to lean a lot on my soft skills. So I would say that the ones that were most transferable from Treasury to product at Cecil were just, the main one is like communication, being really clear. And I think you really notice that when you're working asynchronously in a fully remote team. So believe it or not, our team is fully distributed. We do not have an office. Though we do have a very special tradition where on Wednesdays, we actually pop in to our founder's house and we all work from his kitchen table or his couch. So that is something that's really special for the Sydney-based team. But aside from that, our engineers are all over in Estonia, in Spain, in America. Our head of engineering is in Queensland. So it really is a distributed team. And that's why it's so important to kind of have clear communication, whether that's in a meeting kind of scenario or whether that's in a Slack post. You know, do you use dot points? Do you structure your communication well? And I would say that the second most transferable skill that I think I probably talked a lot about in the interview was attention to detail. And I think that's because PMs are very execution based people. It's kind of like, are you an action and next steps kind of person? And you do really have to have attention to detail and things like that. So I think in part because of all of the different sections that you're probably across, and also because that we work asynchronously, that communication and attention to detail are really important. And actually the last that I would say that I took away as a key learning from Treasury was documentation culture. That was huge. Like, I think because it was such a technical department at the bank, we wrote down everything, like how to run every single process on all the different software. And that's really come in handy when working in a remote team. Like, it just means that you can hand over processes and share learning. So we've got a pretty big documentation culture at Cecil as well. But yeah, I would probably say just lent on all those soft skills and hope for the best.
Fantastic. And I think, like, you know, even, yeah, from kind of those responses, you folks already kind of start to see that, like, with PM, there's this beautiful mix of, like, you know, obviously understanding the tech is super, super important, especially, you know, in working with engineers and understanding what's possible. But equally, I think, you know, like being just a super strong communicator, understanding how to like work with people, like both parts are so invaluable. And that's what I think, you know, for me made it just a super, super fun role when I started. Now kind of a classic one. And hopefully, I think the goal of this next question is for some of the folks in the audience to realize that something that you thought about product management was wrong. Let's see if we can do that. To the panel, what was your number one misconception about product management before you started the role? So in starting off, the thing that you realized about product, be like, oh shit, that is totally different to what I expected. Feel free to hop in, whoever wants it first.
I don't mind going first because mine is not necessarily about product management, but just about building products in general. I used to go into kind of meetings where we'd share the customer feedback and we'd kind of all ideate, and my mind would immediately jump to solutions. I was like, you know, we should add this button, we should introduce this new feature, we should change the copy here. And I think what I'm definitely one of the benefits of working with our head of design is that there's just been such an emphasis on understanding the problem first before you jump to solutions. And I think I had no idea how much effort goes into really articulating the problem, being picky about word choice, and making sure you really understand the pain point before you try to solve for it, because otherwise you're just going to end up creating more problems than you started out with. So I'd say that was probably my biggest misconception, thinking that you solve with solutions. You really solve with problems first. So yeah, that's probably the biggest one that I've learned.
100%. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to product, it's oh yeah, I want to go build features. Let's go build features. Woo, features. But it is problems first and foremost. Please, for the love of God. Sarah, Izzy, any big misconceptions that come to mind for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, I had quite a classic misconception in the sense that I did believe that you had to have a really strong technical background or understanding in order to transition to product management. And I think something that Val has really taught me is that, yes, it's good to have technical knowledge and technical curiosity, but I think more than anything, one of the strongest things or characteristics that a PM should have is being able to think about tech from first principles. For me, working at essentially a food tech company, super different from what you see in, say, SaaS, where you have to have knowledge of software engineering and comp sci and code and whatnot. For my sort of work, you have to have knowledge of sensory testing, food invention, food evaluation, ingredients, things like that. And so it's been really interesting to venture into this world that I had really no experience in before, and starting to think about, how can I understand that technology from first principles? I don't have a degree in food science. I am working with a lot of really incredible people who are insanely knowledgeable about that space. So how can I best support them and empower them to make those tech-driven decisions in a way that kind of still bridges with those customer actions? And for me, having that first principles thought or approach to the technology that I'm working with has been super important. Before I started at Val, I did have a little bit of experience in computer science. I had, worked in a couple of startup accelerators and stuff before, and I did kind of go in with this mindset, you have to know comp sci, you have to have that entrepreneurial background or whatnot. But I think it's been really, interesting to see that more than anything, if you have a really deep curiosity for things, especially technology and the way that technology can solve problems for people in unique ways, then applying that to a product management space, applying that to think about that technology from first principles, I think has been something really surprising for me to kind of step through that journey, understand, and think about how I might apply that to many different contexts as well. So yeah, to all of those in the audience, there's many different types of product management that extend far beyond SaaS. And because there's so many different technologies that exist in this world, deep tech, food invention, etc., beyond SaaS, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to know everything about the technology. You just need to be able to approach it with that curiosity and first principles thinking.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And there's just a little follow-up question in the Zoom chat just from Rebecca. Sarah, would you be able to give just kind of a high level definition of kind of what is first principles thinking? What does that look like for a product manager?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just there's many different ways to approach what people call loosely first principles thinking. For me, in practice, that comes down to just asking really good questions all the time. Always challenging assumptions. Just because something has been done in industry or there's a certain playbook that you can just plug into something, always thinking back to okay, what is the actual objective we need to get to here? And is, this certain playbook or this certain way of doing things with technology the real, the best way to reach that objective, especially when you're doing something like creating a whole new category of food that no one has really seen before. It's so important to keep questioning, keep challenging, and keep breaking conventions as much as you can. And yeah, I think for me, that really drills down to asking really good questions all the time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, very much aligned. And I think kind of common themes there with Joe as well in terms of just fundamental problem solving rather than solution building always. Izzy, any other misconceptions aside from those that came up for you?
Yeah, one rapid fire one. Firstly, I just want to massively echo what Joe and in particular Sarah said. Like at Atlassian, we have, you know, hundreds of PMs and they come from all sorts of backgrounds. Like we've got philosophy, we've got design, we've got data science, we got literally anything under the sun, consulting, finance, whatever, marketing. People can be PMs with any background. So it's yeah, it's the more diverse people we have, the better. So definitely a big plus one to that. And it is not necessarily a misconception that I had, but I do see this with a lot of people coming into product. So I wanted to mention it. It's not something that you can, similar to what Sarah said, it's not something that you can apply a framework to. Like I talk to a lot of other early stage PMs and they're like, oh, can I use my, like, what 2x2 matrix would you apply to this problem? Or like, what RICE prioritization framework should I apply? And it's like, those are helpful and like use them as tools, but those are not the answer to the problem. Like fundamentally, your job as a PM is to navigate ambiguity and to distill simplicity from complexity. And you often have to figure out the framework for how to do that. And it's going to be different for every situation. So I think that's, yeah, a really important misconception to call out.
100%. Yeah, all fantastic insights. And I suppose kind of like, then to kind of like flip around to, okay, like, you know, that's, you know, before and after jumping into PM, understanding, hang on a minute, got to think about things a little differently. I'd love to understand, even just taking a step back earlier in the journey, when you're thinking about applying for a junior product manager role, an associate product manager role, your first product management role, what are the most important skills and experiences that you folks saw recruiters or hiring managers look for in that process? And Izzy, yeah, maybe happy for you to start on this one, as I know you've probably been involved with campus recruiting for Atlassian as well.
Yeah, sure. I think so, like, I think what Joe said about soft skills being the most important thing is 100% true. And like every time I do a performance review at Atlassian, my manager goes, you know, when we talk about soft skills like communication or like influence or whatever, she always makes the point of saying, onto the soft skills, although they shouldn't be called soft skills because they're really the hardest and most important part of the job. And I'm like, that is the tea. It's so true. Like those are the things that really make or break a great PM. So though, you know, clarity of communication, being able to deal with ambiguity, attention to detail, all of that, 100% true. To get a little bit more specific, I can talk to at Atlassian specifically, but I've also I also know people that have interviewed for product roles at Canva, Google, more of like the big tech. I'm sure at startups it's similar skills, but I'm just going to talk to that specifically. There's a few buckets that you want to fill, and then the ways that you can fill those buckets will vary. So first bucket is leadership. So like as a PM, you need to be able to influence and motivate your team, but nobody reports to you. So you need to be good at influencing them without actual authority over them. And in terms of like ways that you could do that, it could be like being the executive of a uni society, like previous experience in team management. I think hackathons are a great one. You can talk about how you operated in like a PM or PGM type of role. There's lots of ways to kind of demonstrate that you've done that, but those are important skills to highlight that you can influence and motivate a team. The second is like, you know, anyone can be a leader, but you're applying to be a product leader specifically. So you need to have some sort of product sense. This can look like anything. It can be like founding a startup. It can be working on your own personal projects. It can be hackathons. It can be writing about product. Like maybe you start a newsletter. Maybe you are a content creator on these sorts of things. You basically need some way to demonstrate that you like can specifically analyze what a product's strengths and weaknesses are and how they should be improved in order to achieve their particular mission, because that's what the job's all about. And then those are like the two main buckets. And then the last bucket is interest, or like a demonstrated interest or preferably experience in the specific problem space that you're applying for as a product manager. So like with Joe, she's super passionate about climate tech. So, you know, big tick, right? It's all about passion, because you need to be able to influence and sell people on the specific problem area that you're passionate about. For me, I'm really passionate about data, sorry. So, you know, I'm a good fit for my team. I'm sure Sarah's really passionate about, you know, what she does as well. So that's kind of that third bucket. And again, lots of different ways to demonstrate that, but that's like the key thing that you're aiming for. I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. No, very comprehensive, very structured, methodical, good product management communication skills in action there. Joe and Sarah, anything else to add for you folks? I suppose on the startup side, it might be a little bit different in terms of, you know, what companies might look for when it comes to PMs. Anything
Yeah,
that
definitely. Yeah. I guess I might want to plus one a couple of the things that Izzy said there. When I was making the transition from strategic design into product management, there were a couple of things that my manager saw in me that I guess kind of spiked and seemed like they would translate easily to that product management skill set. And two of them, like Izzy mentioned, is an ability to navigate ambiguity. So if you can find ways in your life, whether it's at university or in your current job, to navigate really ambiguous situations, things where you're doing something from scratch or something that hasn't been done before, where there's no clear path forward, and figuring out ways that you can create a compass through the complexity of that type of situation, whether it be through setting up kind of little tests or speaking to people and kind of like amalgamating and getting a sense for you know, how people are feeling about certain problems and whatnot, using that as a compass to kind of direct the way forward is super, super important, because product management, it's not like university. You're not doing kind of individual projects and it's over. It's a marathon. You're going sprint after sprint after sprint, and every sprint you're having to redirect the kind of way forward and think about, okay, what's this grand vision that we're aiming towards, and how do each kind of individual week or 2 weeks get us closer to that? I think developing your ability to navigate that sort of ambiguity and find a compass through complexity is so, so important. The other thing I would plus one is definitely leadership abilities. So being a really clear communicator and being able to be a servant leader. You know, like as he said, you're not going to necessarily manage people, but you're trying to kind of really gain buy-in on some of your ideas, and making sure those ideas are also kind of co-designed with your team is super important, and finding ways to kind of practice that sort of leadership in whatever situation you're in now is so important. I think the last thing I would add there, that's not really necessarily a plus one, but we touched on in a couple of points throughout this conversation, is also thinking about yourself as like a T-shaped individual. I don't know if anyone's heard of that framework before. Product management is a great position if you are a generalist. I am a generalist myself. I love so many different things and get bored if I'm just focusing on one thing. But I think it's really important to also find kind of one area that lends itself to product management that you spike in, and make sure that you develop really great skills in that one area. For me, like I've got an understanding of technology, I've got a little bit of understanding of business, and also our kind of industry and competitive landscape, alternative proteins. But the thing I really spike in is this kind of ability to really deeply understand people, their problems, customers, and that human-centered design perspective, and my background in that. And I think if you can find that area that kind of intersects with product management that you spike in, that you can kind of go hard and become, really strong in, that's a really, really great way to approach it. Yeah. We've lost Dan.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's.
Oh.
Am I back?
Still there, just at the bottom.
Cool. You disappeared from my screen.
All good. I am back with a vengeance. Yeah, Sarah, fantastic points there. I think there's a really powerful piece here that I think I personally, as an APM, like underestimated coming in. You mentioned this term ambiguity. And I think in many ways, product managers are kind of like ambiguity managers. Like you come in and it's not like you have like a clear set of like, manager gives you your tasks for the day, your tasks for the week. It's like maybe the very high level like goals or kind of metrics or OKRs are there. And it's kind of up to you how to pace and structure work and choose what to prioritize and what to focus on in order to get there. So, I think like, in building kind of those skills and experiences, any sort of experience you're getting in university, in a side project, even a project at work, where you get to take something from idea to execution, where it's like, where the end kind of like is somewhat clear, but the path to get there is not clear. When there's unclear paths, if you can get practice, treading on those paths, that is going to build that fundamental product skill. At least I found in my experience kind of, with university societies, startup internships and so forth. Joe, any final thoughts to add on this one? We had a lot of good stuff so far.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of like plus one on what you said about servant leadership. I think something that really comes across is, or at least I know that we've hired for, is the willingness to like take on tasks and do really unscalable things. Like, especially at an early stage startup, you do things that are really manual and really time consuming and honestly really painful and frustrating when you're actually doing them, in the hopes that they later get productized and you never have to do it again. But in the meantime, like, I think it's just that willingness to say, yeah, I'll do it, and put your hand up and say yes to things. And I think, like, if you can get that to come across in an interview and say, like, I think the humbleness and willingness to take any job, regardless of, how menial it might be. So that's definitely one of them. And I think the second, just speaking from my personal interview experience, is I think they really look for curiosity. And it was definitely like, I don't know how you demonstrate this. I think the way that it came across for me personally was I actually shared a podcast that I'd listened to with my founder. And I was just like, this is honestly like the most amazing podcast, because I really think that is like the vision of Cecil. And so the podcast, the content itself was not about product management. The content was not even about climate. It was actually about an operating system. And it was an investor from A16Z speaking about operating systems and how they were just really key. And so I think I sent him that podcast, and then he later went and shared that with some other people. And I think that was when I knew, I was just like, yes, the podcast was a good, definitely like a good plug. I was just like, I think that's maybe how you demonstrate curiosity. It's like reading widely, and just, even if you don't know much about the industry, even if you don't know much about the role, just showing in some way that you're curious and keen to learn about things.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think the curious spirit, asking great questions, it all comes back to kind of the same sort of thread where it's like, we don't know how exactly we're going to get there. So let's ask, research, and we'll eventually get to where we want to be. Folks, I think, we've got 15 minutes to go. So I think it's time to hop over to the audience side and get through perhaps some spicy questions, some mild questions, and everything in between. Top of the list. Oh my God. Okay. Yep. It's a compensation question. Classic. Thanks, guys. Thanks, team. Cool. All right, folks, what does compensation look like in PM roles in tech firms? Spill the tea, please. I'll add the addendum there. Like, if you folks don't, as individual PMs, have a strong understanding of what like the salary range looks like for junior PM roles, like where would you go to find that information?
Early work.
Early work. Yeah, ask an anonymous question. Early work is a good start. Any strong thoughts from the panel here? I'm happy to share my.
Yeah. I guess like when I was looking at transitioning from my role as a strategic designer into product manager, I did a bit of research on salaries when I kind of went into that negotiation conversation, and looking at kind of like startup salary guides. I think is it the Galaxy Startup Salary Guide is the latest one. I can't remember the name, but there's a couple of them floating around, are really great ways to kind of gauge salary ranges. And looking at kind of like, especially in the context of startups, like what level of funding do they have? How big is the team currently, and how does that correlate to kind of salary brackets and whatnot? I guess it's also important to consider ESOP, or kind of like equity options, as well as a, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. When you're looking at kind of salaries and how, if you're at an early stage startup that you have really, really strong belief in is going to become an amazing company in the future, then thinking about, do you opt for a larger share of equity and kind of a smaller kind of day-to-day salary as well, is something important to consider. I don't know if the audience wants us to talk exact ranges for salaries, or if that's a good kind of direction to point in. Yeah.
If you want to throw something, you can, but if you're not super confident, that's super fine. I think, I definitely recommend for folks who haven't looked at it before, like the Think and Grow Salary Guide. That's probably for Australia the most comprehensive guide around like tech and startup salaries in Australia, and they just published their like 2022, 2023 data literally last week. Izzy, Joe, anything to add about like how you folks have found information about this, or how you've thought about it in the job search process?
Joe, do you want to go?
I think I did do some research kind of ahead of time, and kind of understanding. It was honestly like didn't really know what to expect, what to look for. I think I did Google kind of what product manager salaries were in Australia, but then also globally, especially if the company that you are working at is global, like it's kind of worth considering. I think something also to consider is how early you're getting into the company that you're in. Like if it's really early stage, then there's a lot more risk, like of whether or not you're going to be there in like say 5 years time. So definitely something to consider. And then probably the last consideration is kind of like your skill set and what you like plan on bringing to the company as well. Like I knew that going in, there would be a very big like learning and development part, like on my part. And so that's something that I factored in when kind of like negotiating salary and stuff. But yeah, I would say it's a mix of all three, and there is no perfect solution to it. I think you just have to, I think just something that's helped is being really transparent and really honest, like the entire process, like about what your reflections are, how comfortable you feel like asking for this. And I've said kind of like all of that in previous, in the interviews and reviews since. So yeah, I'd say that the transparency really helps, and feeling like you can be open is super helpful.
100%. Yeah, like I think broadly, like the pattern you often tend to see like in the industry is like, oftentimes early stage startups, the base salary might be lower, but that's often offset by like a higher share of equity or a higher percentage of the ESOP. At the very biggest tech companies, oftentimes it's a premium on the average salary. I think the most important thing to consider, like, is in when it comes to like PM salary data, it's important to consider that most PMs are not junior. Like product manager has not traditionally been a junior role. So a lot of the salaries might look much higher, like in terms of the average range than other, junior roles. So just important to be mindful that like when starting off, like the average PM salary may not be the average salary for someone who's like just starting the field, cracking into like an APM or junior PM type role. So I just kind of modify that sort of expectation. Cool. Okay. Question 2. In simple terms, what do PMs do on a daily basis? Explain like I'm 5. Who wants to take a stab at it?
I can.
Go for it.
The resounding silence. So I think like I can go into the day-to-day tasks in a second, but I think the important thing to understand is like what the purpose of the role is. So we've talked a lot about being a generalist and kind of being a gap filler, which is very true. But if you think about what the purpose of a product manager is, as opposed to like a product designer or an engineer, like the point of a PM is to figure out which problems to solve, why, and when, and how that relates to the product's future. And so everything that you do day to day relates to that purpose. So in terms of what that looks like day to day, it's anything from like chatting to customers and, understanding their needs and synthesizing that feedback, prioritizing new features for the engineering team to build, curating a product roadmap, like creating and pitching a product vision, creating a strategy, getting buy-in from stakeholders, managing dependencies, working with engineers, working with your designer to like refine the designs and make sure that they're buildable by the engineers, breaking a project into milestones, creating a brand vision, marketing, competitor and market research. So it's all of these sorts of activities that kind of ladder up to that larger purpose. And I don't know if Sarah and Joe find this, but I find that it's very cyclical. So like if I'm leading up to like, we know that we need to start a big project and like the engineers need a product spec, like they need to know what the design's going to look like, then my, 3 to 4 to 5 weeks before that is going to be like market research, understanding what our competitors do, understanding what the customers need, working with my designer to run usability tests with customers and getting everything in shape for them to like kick into the make phase and actually start building the thing. And then once they're in make, I have time to kind of step back a little bit and go like, all right, do we need to do a GTM for the feature we're about to launch? Do we need to revisit our 3 to 5 year long-term vision and strategy? Like, has the market shifted? Do we need to kind of reevaluate where we are? So yeah, I would kind of add that. I hope that's explain it like I'm 5. I hope that answered the question. Just super quickly, Dan, I just wanted to comment on the previous question because I didn't get a chance. The early work anonymous, definitely like go in there. Atlassian specific numbers are in that channel. I'm pretty sure I've seen them floating around there. And yeah, I just wanted to add that as well if anyone was interested.
Super fair. And yeah, I think like, yeah, definitely went into like a lot of the good like tactical data details around like the different tasks you can be doing as a PM, and like I think broadly found similar experiences as well. This is an interesting one, like, you know, in terms of product management interviews, I think it's something that a lot of folks have kind of confusion around. It can be quite different between companies. So I'd love to hear kind of like, you know, from both the startup and big tech side, like what do product management interviews look like at your companies?
I guess, yeah, so I can talk to this. I will flag though that I actually haven't been through a formal kind of product manager interview myself because I joined Val as a strategic designer, but we have kind of the same interview process for all our roles, whereby you kind of have initial hiring manager, a phone screen with our recruiter, then you go into a hiring manager interview. And then after that, you go through a technical challenge, which is the really juicy part where you get to actually see a candidate's ability to execute, create ideas, communicate, etc. And then after that, we have a thing called a super day, which is borrowed from investment banking, I believe, where you talk with 4 different people across the organization in kind of back-to-back interviews. And that's as much a chance for you to get to know the company and its culture as well as us to kind of get to know you from that holistic perspective. In terms of technical challenges, generally what happens is companies like, at least I'm speaking from Val's experience, we take a kind of current problem the company might be working on or have just finished solving, and use that as like a case study to see not only how you might execute, how you might think of ideas, ideate, problem solve there, but also we want to get a sense of how you collaborate as well. We want to get a sense of your curiosity and how that comes out in that process. So let's say you've got a technical challenge that's happening on a certain, that's centered around a certain market and finding some sort of like product market fit there, or some early kind of scoping out work there. You know, it's really great to see candidates who might go and say, actually speak to people in the field as part of that technical challenge. They might kind of reach out to the Good Food Institute, which is a relevant think tank for alternative proteins, and kind of bring in that knowledge into that technical challenge. But more than anything, no matter what format it's in, I can say that it's really great to see good levels of curiosity in technical challenges, collaboration, problem solving, and thinking about how you structure that problem solving as well. It's not necessarily about the ideas that you come up with, but it's your thought process that companies are really trying to get a gauge of. Yeah.
100%. Yes. It's less so like the answer that you come up with. It's more about the thinking style. That's really, really what I find a lot of companies are trying to test in their product interviews. Izzy, maybe just quickly from kind of the big tech side, it'd be good to get just like a high level run through of just those quick steps for the Atlassian process.
Yeah, sure. I also did ping a link in the chat. So if you want more depth, everyone feel free to check that out. But it's basically a couple of steps. The first is your classic phone interview, just to like get to know you and kind of gauge your very basic suitability for the role. You might get some very basic product questions here, but it'll kind of just be like asking about your background. Then there's a series of interviews. No, that's a lie. Then there's a take-home challenge, which is like similar to what Sarah was saying about like a work test. So it'll be, it might be about an Atlassian product, it might be about a product that you use and like day to day. It might be about some specific challenge at Atlassian specifically, but it'll be some sort of work test where basically you're given like, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks to answer some questions and like do a write-up. So in order to prep for that, like just I found reading a lot of product teardowns and product analyses really helpful to kind of flex that muscle. And then it's a series of interviews after that. So there'll be questions on like your background. It'll be, you know, classic behavioral questions like, tell me about a time when you had to motivate an unmotivated team, or tell me about a time when you had to navigate ambiguity, or, you know, something like that. You can find a bunch of those like types of practice questions online. You know, you use your STAR framework, just classic behavioral interview question stuff, and then there'll be product questions as well. So the book I recommend for this is Cracking the PM Interview. It's like, it's so good. I don't think there's anything in there that is not relevant for any product management role that you're interviewing for. It has a lot of like product teardown, product analysis, product improvement, metrics, customer discovery, everything's in there. Read the book. And then there's like also some strategic questions as well. So it might be about like your perspective on a particular market shift that's happened, or like a current event in the tech landscape that you might have to offer an opinion on. There's some wildcard questions in there, but it's all part of the fun. See how you think on your feet. And like Dan and everyone else has said, it's really about like the thinking process. So it doesn't really matter what answer you come to. It's just about like, can you structure out your answer logically, coherently, and communicate the way that you're thinking? That's the most important thing.
Something else I might also jump in quickly and add on top of that is often companies design technical challenges around real problems that you might be working on, say, in your first 3 months on the job. So there's as much a chance for kind of companies to find out about you and how you work, as well as you to find out about, will you actually like this type of work? If you haven't worked in products before, using that technical challenge is an opportunity to see what type of things you might get involved in, and if that is a good fit for you too.
Fantastic. Very thorough answers. Izzy, Joe, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and for elucidating the wild, wacky, and ambiguous world of product management. For all those who are still on the call, really, really appreciate you guys joining, and hope you took away at least 1 or 2 valuable lessons. In terms of kind of next steps from here, if you are still curious about product, in the Earlywork community, we've got a dedicated channel just around product management. So there's lots of current and aspiring PMs in there. Both are welcome. So if you do have any further questions that you didn't get answered today, that's an amazing place to ask them and keep on learning. Big shout out to Atlassian as well for collaborating and helping to bring this event to life. Have a beautiful evening, folks. Cheers. Bye for now.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye.